Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Especially those of you who are following the channel for a while probably know that my favorite focal length is 28mm. But before I made the switch to a wider lens, I was primarily using a 35mm on my M6 for almost 2 years. The lens I'm talking about is the Voigtländer 35mm 1.7 Ultron, and in this video I want to give you my impressions on it and give you my recommendations if you should get one or maybe not. If the 35mm Ultron looks familiar to you, then you might have already owned or seen its brother, which is the 50mm f1.5 Nocton. They have a couple of things in common. Both look almost identical and it's really hard to tell them apart without taking a closer look. And also, both lenses were available in a very shiny chrome finish. Another thing that both lenses share is the fact that they have been discontinued, even though they weren't on the market for that long. I think it's not hard to guess why that might be the case, but more on that a little bit later. I picked up the 35mm Ultron in 2016 when I needed a lens to pair with the Monochrom. Since that one already cost me a fortune, I was looking for a 35mm that wasn't overly expensive but still was able to deliver good image quality and a fast aperture. Back then, the 35mm 1.7 Ultron was the best option since the 1.4 version seemed to be optically not on par. After getting the lens and testing it for the first time, I was convinced that it was the right move to do. Shooting the lens for more than 3 years now, I can tell you that the 35mm Ultron is optically stellar and probably not far off the 35mm Summicron. And especially for the price, it's almost a no-brainer. When shooting wide open, it absolutely delivers and there's no reason to stop it down to gain more sharpness. Also, the bokeh it renders looks very beautiful, but it of course is very subjective and some of you might even prefer a rather busy looking background blur. Besides sharpness, contrast is really good too, and overall there isn't much to complain about when it comes to image quality. Now you might think that this could be it, the perfect 35mm for your Leica M? Well, there are some issues that might not matter to you but bothered me quite a bit and made me think about replacing the lens. However, since I've migrated towards a 28mm lens, there is no need to do that anymore. So what are those issues? The build quality of the lens is really good and the aperture ring is easy to use and not too loose. However, since they wanted to use this retro design for the lens, the focusing ring is very narrow and sits a little too close to the camera body, and that makes it kind of awkward to use. And because it is so narrow and weirdly shaped, my fingertips did hurt when I was shooting for hours. It got better over time, but still I couldn't understand why Voigtländer didn't go for a wider focusing ring and maybe adding a focusing tab. That would have made a huge difference. Especially in winter when wearing gloves, it is very hard to focus the lens and a wider focusing ring would have made such a big difference. Now, after using a 28mm Summicron for about a year, every time I have the 35mm Ultron in my hands, I still can't believe why Voigtländer messed this up big time. Besides that, there isn't really much to complain about. The only thing I would add is that the lens comes with a lens hood that is a screw-in type and doesn't have a cutout. So if you want to use the hood but have less viewfinder blockage, you can get a replacement for that, but it will set you back 100 euros at least. What you will get is an adapter that screws in the filter thread and the lens hood will go on top of that and it is held in place by a screw on the side. That works very well, but I would still suggest you simply don't use one at all. So would I recommend to get a Voigtländer 35mm f1.7 Ultron? Well, it depends. If you can get one for really cheap, yes, it's a great buy and it will give you really great results. Unless you might also be bothered by the annoying focusing ring, then you should not buy it. As I mentioned before, the lens has been discontinued and I guess that is because there's a new kit on the block, and that is the 35mm f2 Ultron. It's significantly smaller, has a focusing tip, though it's not as good as the one you would find on a Leica lens, but still there is one. And the aperture of f2 isn't that much slower. Though if you want a faster lens, then they also offer a brand new 35mm f1.2 in its third iteration that looks really impressive and turned out way smaller and lighter than its predecessors. And of course they still sell the 35 1.4 Nocton. And if you're on a really tight budget or you simply don't care about the maximum aperture and instead you want a really small lens, then the 35mm f2.5 might be for you. I think overall it was a good idea to discontinue the 1.7 because otherwise they would have had 5 35mm lenses in their lineup. Besides the Voigtländers, there are a ton of 35mm lenses available for Leica M mount, but to cover all of them it would probably take hours. However, if you have a great recommendation for a 35mm lens for M mount that can be had for less than 1000 euros, let me know in the comments down below. And I will just collect all of your recommendations and put them in a pinned comment below this video so everybody can see. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Don't forget to pre-order my brand new X-Benzene until June 28th. If you're interested, the link will be in the description box down below. And I hope to see you all again tomorrow in the next video. Until then, auf Wiedersehen.